Hi, it's Kai. Number 12, Blackcruciform Stone. First, we head back to the year 1881. It was then that the British Museum found something they didn't expect: a black cruciform stone at the temple of Shamash in Sapir, modern-day Iraq. What's more, this special stone was covered in all sorts of inscriptions. According to the inscription, it was created during the reign of Manishtushku, king of Akkad, who ruled in 2276 BCE. The stone inscription tells a tale of a noble king who showered the temple with gifts and many other wonderful things. The last line of the inscription says, "This is not a lie. It is indeed the truth. He who will damage this document, let Enki fill up his canals with slime." One problem though, and I'm pretty sure you can guess. It was a fake. But why was this faked? Well, apparently, the priests of that time were a bit pig-headed and arrogant in regards to what they felt was good for the faith. It's a lie, a forgery likely created by the priests of the temple to put the official seal of approval of antiquity and royalty on the many privileges and large income they enjoyed. It's a kind of forgery known as a pious fraud, when an artifact or document is created to deceive for the good of the faith. In this case, the good of the faith meaning the good of the priests' wallets. Number 11, the horses of St. Mark. While plundering and looting are generally thought of as more of a modern phenomenon, with most events taking place over the past few centuries, it has, in fact, been going on for centuries. Sometime around 330, a set of 4 bronze horses that appeared to be frozen in mid-trot were stolen, perhaps from somewhere in Greece, by a man named Constantine. Eventually, they made their way to the capital of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, in what is now modern-day Turkey, and they remained there for centuries. Then, in the year 1204, as the city was being ransacked, the Venetian Doge Enrico Dandulo's troops stole the sculptures and brought them to Italy, where they were placed before St. Mark's Basilica. But they didn't catch a break after that. Napoleon's soldiers took them and then mounted them atop the Arc de Triomphe in 1797. They actually just narrowly avoided being melted down into cannonballs. In 1815, the statues were then returned to St. Mark's, though today they are now kept inside the basilica instead because of the risks posed by the air pollution. Number 10, the Scepter of Agamemnon. Greek mythology is something that is very well known in our world today, and for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is that these tales of heroes, gods, men, and monsters are some of the most used for inspiration in media and beyond. But once upon a time, people of the world were so enamored with them that they sought out the actual artifacts believed to have been held by these legendary heroes and warriors. These miracles of the world, as they were dubbed, included the shield and sword of Agamemnon, Odysseus's cloak and breastplate, Teucer's bow and arrows, and Penelope's loom. But the most prized of them all was the Scepter of Agamemnon, which was said to have been forged by the mighty maker god known as Hephaestus. The problem, as you might guess, is that these were fakes, and some even pointed them out to be fakes, not the least of which is that even the most mortal of these Greek characters were never proven to be real. But others believed in them so much that they made sacrifices to them and held them in sacred places for certain periods of time. This shows how the power of myth can make you believe almost anything if you get the look and the feeling right. Number 9, Wedding at Cana. In today's world, art is something that if you really want to see it, you can just look it up on the internet. But back in the olden days, if you wanted to see it, you had to go and see it. Such was the case with the painting known as Wedding at Cana, made by Paolo Veronese. This wasn't just a painting on a page or a small canvas, but a 32-foot long painting that was held in St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. It was such a popular painting that the people had to be capped at 100 every day because so many wanted to see it. But another person who wanted to see it was none other than Napoleon. In 1797, his soldiers went in and stole the painting, but it was so large that they actually had to cut it into pieces, which would be sacrilege in the world of art today. And then they stitched it back together in France. Oh, and you might remember they stole a set of bronze horses on that trip as well. As for what happened to that painting, it stayed in France. Yep, the wedding at Cana can now be seen at the Louvre Museum, and it's not surprisingly one of its most popular pieces, to the extent that the Venetian people have been trying, unsuccessfully, for centuries to get the painting back, because, it was theirs to begin with. Have you ever been to the Louvre? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons too. Number 8. The Journal of Dictis. As noted before, the tales of Greek mythology were well known amongst the ancient war, and anything from those legendary times was felt to be a priceless treasure, especially when it came to the much debated Trojan War. Such a piece of history was the legendary Journal of Dictis, who apparently had a first-hand written account of the Trojan War, and when forgers heard about this, well, they went to work, even making a preface that would help sell that this was real, including noting things in history that would be plausible, like it being written in Phoenician first and then later translated to Greek, and the length of the text and so on and so forth. Eventually, it was learned that these were fake, but at what time? This was literally hallowed antiquity. Number 7. Statues from the Parthenon. There were a few unfortunate truths when it comes to the antiques of the world that can't help but be spoken of, even though some nations and rulers don't want to talk about it. One of the biggest ones is that the British aren't exactly the nicest people when it comes to being honest about how they got some of their treasures. Look up the Crown of Jewels for a good example of that. But another was in the year 1816. The British Museum got a set of statues from the Parthenon in Athens for £35,000, about 4.8 million today. The Parthenon, of course, is one of the most important places in Greek culture, and these statues were said to have been found in an excavation that took over 10 years to finish. The problem? No, they weren't fake, but the deal that allegedly allowed Britain to get these statues is suspect, to say the least. Not the least of which was because the proper documents that would help oversee such a transaction can't seem to be located. Greece has even gone so far as to demand the statues be returned to them, and UNESCO even tried to broker a deal, but Britain stood firm in their beliefs about the statues. The trustees of the British Museum are entirely satisfied that the Parthenon sculptures were legally acquired, a spokesperson told Art News in 2020. Number 6. The Apollo of Pyambino. In ancient times, there were few greater pieces of art than statues. This is why items like Venus de Milo are so special. But the problem is that a lot of these statues, especially ones made of bronze during the 1st through 5th century BCE, were lost or destroyed. Then, in 1832, one was found near the city of Pyambino. It was dubbed the Apollo of Pyambino, and there was almost a frenzy to get to it. Not too shockingly, the Louvre picked it up and proudly displayed it as an example of their archaic style that had been long lost. But if you actually look at the statue, you'd see that some things were off. Mainly, there were details in the style, the gestures, and more that made it feel real, but look fake. And sure enough, the Louvre eventually had to admit that they had bought a fake. You see, back then, forgers were more than happy to make fakes to please the market, and this was a perfect example of that. Number 5. The Golden Crown of Magdala. The British are at it again. Head to 1868, and you'll see a fierce battle between the forces of Britain and the people of Ethiopia. The latter had an empire, and the British sought to topple it. So much so that they conquered and raided the city of Magdala and took many riches that were there, including the Golden Crown of Magdala, a crown that was not only very regal, but said to have been made for a ruler and their son. That crown is now on view at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and as you might have guessed, the people of Ethiopia have demanded its return on several occasions, not the least of which was during the 2018 exhibit that was meant to highlight the crown among other artifacts. The museum notes on its website that the works act as an unsettling reminder of the imperial processes which enabled British museums to acquire the cultural assets of others. This is honestly their way of admitting that they stole it, but they don't feel the need to return it. And as of 2021, they have not returned this to the people of Ethiopia. Number 4. The Chebaka Stone. Remember that piece I mentioned before about the priests creating fakes for the good of the faith? Well, this is a slight twist on that. The Chebaka Stone was made by Nubian pharaoh Chebaka, an outsider who had just captured the Egyptian capital of Memphis. Yes, Memphis was the first true Egyptian capital. Anyway, because he was an outsider, he needed to make the people believe that he wasn't all that bad. So the Chebaka Stone was made and inscribed with ancient texts and scripture that connected to the ancient texts the Egyptian people had, that was a bit worse for wear, and thus couldn't be deciphered one way or another. By doing this, he would get the priests on his side, and the people would follow. You have to admire the effort the man put into making this work, and though it was fake, sometimes a fake kind of word can get the job done. Number 3. Senegal Sword. Study history long enough and you'll see that both the British and French empires had a fascination with Africa and seeing all the wonders that were down there, and then stealing it for themselves, such as the Senegalese sword that was once in the possession of Omar Sadao Tall. In 1893, after Tall's son, Amadou, was defeated in battle by the French, the sword was taken from Africa and brought to France, where it's now part of the Army Museum. However, unlike certain other times on this list, it didn't stay in French hands, as it was willingly given back to France in 2019. The French government claimed that it was a restitution to the people of Senegal for what happened in the past. The hope is that the other items that the French took during their tours into Africa will be returned in due time. But considering it's estimated that they have about 90,000 such objects, that could take a while. Number 2. Fake mummies. That might sound funny to you, but if you really think about it, mummies from ancient cultures like Egypt and others were gold mines for archaeologists both then and now. But for the people of Egypt back in the times when mummies were made, they had mummies of their animals and such made as devotions and gifts to the gods. It became common practice to have a mummified animal alongside the fallen person, but there wasn't enough to go around. As such, a massive market boomed for fake mummies. And even when they were discovered to be fakes, people still bought ones like them, even though it was all confirmed that they were not real animals. Number 1. Machu Picchu artifacts. The rediscovery of Machu Picchu was a big deal in archaeological terms, for the reason that it helped paint a big picture of how impressive the Incan Empire was. Plus, it was found by accident. Hiram Brigham III was the one who excavated the ruins, and he found untold wonders within them, and then promptly took them to Yale University in America for research purposes. The problem was that Yale didn't want to give them back at all. Yes, some did return willingly, but Yale stated that Peru had waited too long to go and ask for their natural treasures back. Eventually, a deal was brokered and the objects were returned. Thanks for watching. What did you think of this look at the art and archaeology that has been stolen and forged throughout history? Which of these were the most impressive or amazing to you? And do you think we'll continue to find pieces like this as time goes on? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and I'll see you next time. Bye!